Hello, buddy. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.9 mid-tier list. So you can find access to this Google Doc in the description and timestamps if you don't have time to watch the whole video. I have it broken up into two different tiers, just Tier 1 and Tier 2. I'm trying to consolidate a little bit so that I have a bit more time to talk about each champion. So we're only going to have two ranks instead of, further down the list. Because realistically, if you're really trying to climb as fast as possible outside of one tricks and things like that, then you should probably be playing one of the champions in this top 10. But I would say also that mid is probably the most diverse lane out there, so there are plenty of picks that I couldn't quite squeeze onto the list. They're still very valuable, and I mentioned some of them here in the honorable mentions that we'll talk about here at the end. If you want to watch my patch notes video, I already have that up as well, linked right here, and I have the support tier list video posted up as well right here. So, my methodology for this is I'm primarily targeting Plat minus. My wife is putting a child's toy on me. I'm primarily targeting people who are playing in Plat and lower, although I think a lot of this will apply to higher ELOs as well. And I've focused very heavily on reliability. Now, a lot of these champions are going to be relatively difficult to play, but I do think about that when I'm picking the champion. I'm not just picking stuff that's going to be really good in pro play, like Ryze, Azir, Cassiopeia. I think, will people actually be able to pull this off with a reasonable amount of practice in solo queue? And then I think about the meta overall as well in my methodology. So I do consider statistics, and we'll talk about statistics throughout the video, but I also think about what's the potential for this champion? How is this champion trending sort of going forward? So I do mention something specifically, Rakan, this instance, who I think is not getting a ton of recognition in the mid lane right now. Nevertheless, I think is really strong. Some mid laners are playing it at high elo. It does have a good win rate, and I think people are going to start picking this up a little bit more as more and more people figure out about it. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get in here. So first up, I have Fizz near the top of the list. Fizz is going to be up this high for several reasons. Number one, actually I have a Google Doc here as well. If you want to click on these. And I'm going to try to do this a lot faster. I know I always say that. I have like hour-long videos. I'm going to really try to make this 30 to 45 minutes as much as possible. So I'm trying to talk quickly, move quickly here to get through all of this. But I do have a mini Google Doc for each champ that I designed to give you sort of a snapshot about it. It has the League Wikia linked for you. Has sort of a 5-point rating system. 3 champions that the champion's strong against, 3 that they're weak against, runes, and then items. As far as the rating system goes, 1 basically means one of the weakest in the position at doing whatever the task is, and then 5 is one of the strongest ones. So as far as lane pressure, I'm just talking about ability to push in the wave, ability to zone off of CS, ability to trade in lane and win trades. So just how much sort of during the laning phase, about levels 1 to 8 before the lanes break, how effective is this champion at just not outright killing somebody, but denying resources to them. So that's what lane pressure is. And then kill threat is how likely is this champion to land a kill in their lane, either 1v1 or through a gank. Okay, so that's kill threat. Safety is how likely is this champion to die, particularly during the laning phase, but also thinking about, as the game develops, what kind of safety mechanisms do they have? Do they have mobility? Do they have some sort of defensive capabilities? How likely is it that this champion can go about without dying too often? Scaling. Now, this is really complicated. I have an entire video about scaling on the channel, but things to think about in terms of scaling are, what are their AP ratios? What are their AD ratios? How much damage do they do outright? Then also, do they have other utility that's really valuable? Do they take towers really quickly? Do they take objectives really quickly? Do they have really strong utility in team fights? Do they have really good split pressure? So all of this goes into how a champion scales over time. And then finally, reliability encompasses a lot of different things, but primarily, how likely is it that this champion is going to be played in an optimal way from game to game? So this can include how difficult is the champion to play on sort of just a mechanical level. So how hard are their skill shots to land? How difficult are their combos? How fast does the timing have to be? But also in terms of how easy is this champion to shut down? Is this champion shut down really easily with just a simple item like a Quicksilver Sash? Are there certain popular picks out there in the meta right now that very easily shut down this champion? Does this champion require a lot of coordination with the team? Some champions, primarily I'm thinking like Tom Kench or Thresh, from the support role require a lot of coordination with your team, or they're just not going to perform as well as they might in professional play. So those are all things that I take into account when I think about reliability as well. So how consistent is this champion? How often do you know what you're going to get when you have this champion in your games? Okay, so let's talk about Fizz here really quickly then. Let's look at his League with Kia. I'm not going to go over all of his abilities here, obviously, in depth, but the key one that you need to know about is Playful Trickster. This is really important because it makes him untargetable, and he can use this to either escape or to engage. And this means that he can dodge a lot of other things out there. I believe he can dodge like a Zed ult marking you if you time it properly. He can dodge like a Karthus ult. And then, of course, he can dodge skill shots as well. So he could dodge like a Jinx missile or an Ezreal ult and all those kind of things. But the fact that he does go untargetable means that he can dodge all sorts of things. Also, he's very good at early diving. So that's not something that you see a lot at Plat Minus, but he could roam down bottom, do a full combo on somebody and then get out with his Playful Trickster because it changes the target whenever he goes up on his trident and then comes back down. So he's got a lot of uses there. And that makes him very difficult to deal with, especially for a lot of these enchanters, because they're not going to be able to exhaust him before he lands. They're not going to be able to blow him back with like a Janna ult. They're not going to be able to polymorph him. Because once he gets fed enough, if he lands his ultimate on somebody, this fish, and then he Playful Tricksters, hops up, and then lands on top of somebody, they're probably dead most of the time. And so that makes his engage very difficult to deal with, because he can engage from outside of the range of a lot of other interaction, and then when he goes in for the kill, then it's difficult to interact with him as well. He's also AP damage, which is really important in a meta that's increasingly becoming defined by AD jungles and AD top lanes. So a lot of the best top laners right now that are performing well, thinking about like Darius, Irelia, Camille, Fiora, most of the top lane powerhouse picks are going to be AD, and then increasingly a lot of the jungle picks are AD as well. So you're thinking about like Kha'Zix, Graves, Master Yi are all becoming very popular and strong in this meta. And so if you have an AD jungle and an AD top lane, and then of course you're going to have an AD carry, and you want to pick something that's AD mid lane, like a Zed or a Talon, that's going to be really rough. So Fizz helps balance that out by giving you a very heavy AP threat assassin, and there aren't a ton of those that are really good right now. There are some, which we'll talk about. But that is a unique thing that he brings to the table. So he's very difficult to interact with. Of course, he has a ton of damage. He's very mobile. He's really safe in the laning phase. And he's a huge source of AP damage, which fits very well into the meta. Also, with a lot of champions on this list, the meta is shifting more towards melee, high burst damage champions. Riot really wants to make that a thing, and they've done that in several ways. Most recently, they lowered wave clear by quite a lot, and they nerfed mana. It's not going to affect Fizz very much. He doesn't have mana problems. He can't get pushed in a tower as much early on. So they're trying to make champions like Fizz a lot more viable in the laning phase. And then I think it was last patch also they nerfed Ninja Tabi and Locket. If it wasn't last patch, it was the patch before that. But those are also two other tools. So now a lot of supports aren't going to run Locket as much. If they do, they're not going to be as effective. Ninja Tabi doesn't affect him as much, although it's useful to note that with his Seastone Trident, his next basic attack is empowered, resetting his auto attack timer, deals bonus magic damage. Okay, so this, I believe Ninja Tabi, the 12% on Ninja Tabi, I think they bumped it up to 12 or 10. I can't remember what it is these days. I think it's 12. They bumped it from 10 to 12 and then lowered the armor by 10. That actually affects his Seastone Trident because that is an on-attack modifier. So it would actually lower this, the Ninja Tabi, by a certain amount. So the fact that people are going to be getting less Ninja Tabi actually makes his Seastone Trident do a lot more damage, and this is one of his main damage abilities in his kit. So it actually does help out Fizz, the Ninja Tabi nerf, although it seems kind of odd because he's mostly AP, because a lot of his damage is stacked onto an attack. Then that does help him out. And then they've just nerfed tanks all over the place, just a litany of nerfs across the board to the Resolve Tree, Inspiration, they nerfed... Is it Cinder Hulk? Then a while ago they nerfed Knight's Vow. They just nerfed all kinds of tank stuff. They've nerfed all of the major tanks directly when you're thinking about like Sejuani in particular. It's just kind of out of there. So he's got a lot more viable targets he can assassinate. And enchanters are really strong right now in general too because they've nerfed the tank supports a lot. So he just has a field day. Almost everybody's a good viable target. Some mini comps actually aren't even running tanks these days in solo queue. So that makes him very, very strong in the overall meta. And that applies to all assassins, but especially to Fizz because he's AP, because he's so mobile, and he has such high burst. So I think Fizz is in a great place right now. So he doesn't have a lot of lane pressure, virtually none. He's not going to really threaten you in lane unless he gets really far ahead a lot of the time. He's not great in the early levels, but he has really high kill threat. He's very safe. He has extremely high scaling, very good ratios on his abilities, and he's fairly reliable. Yeah, you do have to hit your shark, but his mechanics are fairly simple. He has an auto attack reset on his W. But he's a relatively straightforward champion compared to some of the other assassins on the list, like a Zed, like a LeBlanc. LeBlanc's actually in my honorable mentions, but there are a lot of more difficult champions to play on this list. But he is definitely decidedly about average for skill in mid lane. Maybe slightly above, but around average. Really strong against squishy champions that rely heavily on CC to try to deal with him. So Syndra, for example, he can dodge her ult if he goes up on his trident. He can dodge her stun. Talia, kind of the same deal. He can dodge all of her stuff she wants to do to him and get right in his face. And, of course, he can dodge Twisted Fate's gold card and get in his face. So he is very, very good against those champions. Champions that he might struggle against a little bit would be like a Vlad, a Swain. People are going to stack a bunch of health. People that can get Zhonya's really easily and dodge out his fish damage. So the fish attaches, they Zhonya's, they don't take any damage. And then Ekko, because if you don't completely delete Ekko, then he's just going to heal back all of his health. So Ekko's pretty good against assassins as well. And you'll find this rune page with a lot of the champions that are on the top 10 list right now. We've got Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter. Helps him out with healing in lane. Electrocute scales really well into the late game for all-in burst combos. Sudden Impact's going to give him 10 extra magic pin, which is really strong. And then, of course, you have your suite of all-in protection. So Bone Plating and Chrysalis. And you can replace Chrysalis with Second Wind if you're against a poke champion. Recommended items, Sork Boots, Protobelt, Zhonya, Lichbane. Pretty standard. You get in their face, Protobelt's going to hit them with all of the bolts. It's big time damage. You can get this faster than most other AP items. Especially since you don't have to get mana, you don't have to, charge up a Rod of the Ages, you don't have to charge up a tier, you can just get right in there level 6 and kill some of those slower champions with this 2,500 gold item. Then Zhonya's is relatively cheap too, it's like 2,700 gold. Lichbane's on the expensive side, I think it's 3,200. But overall, very, very strong assassin in the mid lane. Pretty good against other assassins because he has the potential to outplay a lot of their other interactions. So, very, very strong right now. He takes my number 1 slot. And you can see, and I'll look at some League Wiki I just looked at. We might look at pro builds a little bit for some of these champions. And then I also have the Lowalytics, which gives you the statistics for different champions. So they rate him pretty highly. He's got a 52.5% win rate. And that is pretty high, especially for an assassin in particular. Usually you see really consistent kind of range champions get up that high. So a champion like Aurelion Sol or maybe a Morgana might get that high because both of the... Aurelion Sol is kind of hard to play in his own way. But usually assassins that have a ton of potential to fail, a ton of missed skill shots, and they require snowball, those usually don't find their way very high on a lot of tier lists. And if they do, it typically means that they're pretty overpowered. So when you start seeing things like Zed and LeBlanc, LeBlanc's actually pretty far down the list. I don't know why Morgana's... Okay, there we go. Stuck on there. But a lot of these high skill cap champions usually find their way towards the bottom of the list. You've got like your Azir, your Syndra, your Lissandra, and your LeBlanc are way lower. But these other ones are really high, even though they're fairly difficult to play. That means they're extremely strong in a meta when you see them near the top of a tier list. Okay, Zed is the other one that I have at number 2. Now, Zed is a lot stronger these days, so he benefits from the Ninja Tabi and the Locket nerfs and just all the other tank stuff that I talked about with Fizz. But then also, he doesn't use any resources at all. So he has energy. Well, he has energy as a resource, but not mana, right? And that's the key. So they keep nerfing mana as a way to try to stop people from wave clearing, to stop people from roaming. Well, Zed has pretty good wave clear, and he doesn't use mana. So he's going to be somebody, as they're trying to rework the mana and stop wave clear, unless they nerf his wave clear specifically, then he's going to be someone who's strong. Also, kind of like Fizz, he has the potential to outplay a lot of different things. With his ult, he can dodge different abilities because it makes him untargetable. And he has that extra added mobility where he can go in, kill somebody, and then get out really quickly with his shadows. So he has really high scaling, pretty good lane pressure. He is sort of ranged. He can use his shadow to harass if he wants to, although it's on the dangerous side. Then he can use his shurikens, obviously, to harass as well. So that gives him a decent amount of lane pressure. He has really high kill threat, especially at level 6, especially if he gets an item or two. Once he has that single item power spike, which is probably one of the strongest of any of the mid laners with the Dust Blade. it is a ton of damage on him, especially if you can hit him once and then use your ult again. So if you get close to him with your shadow, I'm not sure about all of the intricacies of his combos and like the correct order to do it in different situations, but if you can somehow come up to them and auto attack them once and then use your ult so that you basically go invisible again and then auto attack them again, you can get off double Dustblade procs. That's really, really strong. And they just buffed, if he hits somebody with multiple shurikens, it does extra damage, and they buffed his ult damage. They've buffed him quite a bit in recent patches. Let's see if I can pull this up here. Just his history and look at it. So they've been grooming him to be one of the best assassins. And I think that's pretty good for the game. I think Zed is one of the most balanced assassins for the game. He does a lot of damage. I know it can feel like you can't do much to him, but you do have potential to outplay him because his ult is delayed and he usually requires his ult to kill somebody. So the Enchanter can shield you. You can use your heal or sort of other defensive mechanics to try to get out of it. Versus someone like a Talon who's a lot more toxic that just like appears and just instantly kills you and there's just nothing you can do about it hardly. So I like Zed as far as assassins go. I think he's one of the more balanced assassins in that he has a lot of skill expression. If you're really bad on Zed, he's not going to function that well and he's very difficult to play correctly. But yeah, this is 8.7, so they increased the secondary ratio to 54%, and the secondary base damage is up quite a bit. Right, and then 8.6. Okay, so they basically reduced it and then buffed it right back up. So they undid the changes, it looks like. But one of the big things here is that they removed damage being reduced on shurikens that hit the same enemy. So it used to be reduced by 50%, but now you can hit someone with up to 3 shurikens and do a ton of extra damage when you're all-inning them. And then it gives you this extra percentage damage that's stored, which is actually pretty high. Like 5% doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot. And then 10% is definitely a ton later on. And then they lowered the cooldown on his ult, especially later on in the game, by 20 seconds. So they've been grooming him to be a bit stronger, and now with the Ninja Tabi nerf, the Locket nerf, and all of that, it's pretty good. So one thing you have to be aware of with Zed is that he's AD damage instead of AP, so if you have that Graves jungle and a Fiora top, then it's going to be really tough to pick him because they can just stack armor on the enemy team. So, very strong. He has low reliability because he's very difficult to play. So that's why he's down that low. So he's particularly good against champions who don't want to build Hourglass early on at least, and requires scaling to come online. So Kassadin, Ryze, and Cassiopeia are just not going to be able to fight him early. He might force them into an early arm guard, which is going to slow their damage progression by a ton. You know, these champions need to get Tier and Rod of the Ages early, and if they get delayed in that, both of those are stacking items. And so if they have to stop and even get like a cloth armor, it's going to delay their power curve by quite a bit. So yeah, it's good against Zed if they want to get, arm guard early on to try to prevent damage, but they're going to do nothing else against the rest of the enemy team if they do that a lot of the times. Unless it's a 4 AD team, and then they're going to get a lot of extra value out of that. So champions, well, Kassadin doesn't typically get tier, he just gets Rod, but he takes forever to scale up anyways, and his shield's not going to do anything instead. So the champions that are going to be good are the champions who can comfortably build an arm guard fairly early. So like a Vlad, a Swain. Yeah, they do need to get Rod of the Ages early, but they also have very special interactions. And their base damages and their base sustain is strong enough to where if their Rod gets delayed a little bit because they have to get an arm guard or they have to get a cloth armor, they'll still be valuable later on, right? And so these champions that stack a ton of health and naturally want to get Hourglass because of their different interactions are going to be very strong. Aurelion Sol doesn't get Hourglass, but he stacks just an incredible amount of health because he gets Rod of the Ages and Rylai's and Leandri's, which all have health, and he has extremely high base health. So that just makes it very difficult to assassinate him. And he can comfortably get Ninja Tabi if they want. Any of these can comfortably get Ninja Tabi. They don't have to have the Sork boots to be effective. Okay, and then on Zed, you want to go Electrocute, Sudden Impact, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter. Same thing as the other ones. Then Tabi, and then it's sort of your choice if you want to start with Dustblade or Ghostblade. Dustblade gives you much more damage, but Ghostblade allows you to roam to side lanes. So if you're against a tank or in the mid lane for some reason, or if you're against somebody who's stacking a bunch of armor or kind of hard counters you, or you're just having a tough lane, then you can go for Ghostblade and roam to those side lanes if you want. Or if someone is just really, really vulnerable in the side lane, like that Soraka and Draven just keep pushing up really hard in the bot lane and you want to go down there and try to make a play, Ghost Blade might be the answer, but you definitely get both of these. It just depends on which order and sort of how the game's going. Then after that, Black Cleaver, just so that you have even more armor penetration. So Zed, very, very good right now, and I think some of the items they're testing out on the PvE are going to make him even better on the next patch. So extremely good. If you want to learn Zed, this is a good time to try to pick him up. He is hard to play, but he is pretty rewarding. All right, let's keep moving. Vladimir, for some reason, I don't know why this sort of wigging out on me here. Let's go to 9. I must have accidentally pressed something. There we go. Now we're set up. Now it doesn't look as weird. Hopefully. That does kind of look weird, actually. There we go. I'll check the document to make sure it's... Okay, good. We're good. I must have just accidentally copied an extra version of it there. So Vlad is getting very strong right now. Let's pull up old Vlad here. So similar in concept to Zed, he doesn't really have a resource that's going to limit him in the lane. And he can put up quite a lot of pressure. He has healing in lane. He can push the lane really easily if he wants to. He's very good against assassins because he has such a huge health pool. He can go untargetable with the Sanguine pool to dodge a lot of interactions. Has a ton of sustain, really high damage scaling on his abilities. I mean, this is a 100% AP ratio if you charge this all the way up. That's a lot of scaling. That's AoE. It hits everybody in a 600 radius. And then Hemoplague obviously does a ton of damage as well. Increases damage from all sources, so you and your allies, by 10% for 4 seconds, and has really high base damage and really nice AP ratio. It is on a long cooldown, but it's great. And then, of course, his Empowered Crimson Rush does a base of up to 300 damage with 111% AP ratio. It increases the healing. Heals for an additional ton of health. I mean, he can heal up like half of his health bar with this. So he's just very, very strong, and a lot of the really good AP items right now are also going to have health on them. So if you think about things like the Leandri's Rylai's combo, that has extra synergy with him because he gains extra AP based on his health, and he gains extra health based on his AP. So he's very, very strong, especially since they've nerfed a lot of the other high sustained damage hyper carry mid lane. So I'm thinking like Cassiopeia, Ryze, and Azir primarily. And a lot of kind of the longer range poke champions also aren't doing so hot right now. So we're thinking about like a Talia here. Hasn't been doing that great lately. And some of these roam champions. There are some of the roam champions like Twisted Fate and Aurelion Sol, which we'll talk about in a second, that are still pretty good. But there aren't as many of those running around because of the Talia's not doing well, and also because Ryze and his ultimate got nerfed quite a bit. And Galio's not being played in the mid lane. So a lot of these are, you know, really good strategies against Vlad that just aren't as viable right now because he doesn't roam to mid lane. He doesn't roam to side lanes that well. He doesn't deal with really heavy poke that well. And he can get outscaled by champions like Azir and Ryze later in the game because he does pretty good sustained damage, but not as high as those people. So this makes him a lot stronger. Also, if we look at him on pro builds, you'll notice that a lot of people are building Shirelias on him. And this is extremely powerful. So one of the things, and you've seen this with Ivern in the past, and I've talked about this with other champions, particularly in respect to why tank supports have a hard time, is because other lanes poach their cheap items. This is a really difficult design problem from Riot, and I'm not going to go too far into it right now, but basically they are committed to letting supports get multiple items. This wasn't the case back in the day. Supports just used to get a bunch of wards, and there were no special support items outside of like gold per 10 items. But there weren't anything that were specifically priced and designed for support back in the day. But they want supports to be more fun, and that's good for the game, to have more people playing support so the queue times aren't as long. And so that it feels like an important, special, you know, and powerful position. And so they have this suite of items that are all somewhere between like 2,100 and 2,300 gold. Usually they're designed specifically for supports. This has become a problem with tanks because junglers are starting to pick up Locket, Knight's Vow. You even had like Gangplank picking up Targons, and AD carries picking up Targons early on in the season. So tank items get poached all the time, and that's why they have to be nerfed, and that's why tanks have a lot of problems, is because they can't have cool toys because other lanes take their toys. Well, Vlad is kind of doing that here with Shirelias, and there are a couple other champions that are starting to do that with the new Shirelias, right? Because this gives him almost everything that he wants, right? He gets ability power, health, cooldown reduction, move speed, and has a 60-second cooldown, basically ghost, that you get for yourself. This is an extremely powerful item on Vlad. This is one of the things that he wants more than anything else is move speed, so that he can dive, get to that back line while he's sanguine pooled and he's charging up his E, So, he wants to run in, ult everybody, start charging up his E, Sanguine pull in, have the E explode on everybody on the back line, and then just like, empowered Q one of their squishies and blow them up. And then he heals through all of that. So that's what he wants to do. Unlike some of these other... So he's kind of a weird mixture of like this AP, like sustained damage champion, like you might see with something like the Azir Rise Cassiopeia, but he also dives onto the back line, almost like an Olaf-esque type of just charge while you're untargetable and just get to that back line and blow up the squishies. So he's a very unique and interesting champion in that way. But this allows him to get a faster power curve that you were seeing with some of the tanks in other lanes that were buying things like Knight's Vow and Locket, because a lot of the really good AP items are going to cost you around 3,000 gold. So if we think of Luden's as like 3,200, Rod of the Ages is a little bit cheaper at 2,700. But a lot of these items are somewhere between like 2,700 and 3,200 gold. Well, Shirelia's is only 2,100, so he's going to be able to get it much faster on a back. And he can use Proto Belt, which is also cheap at 2,500. So, he only has to pay 4,600 gold to get two of these big primetime items that are massive power spikes on him. Proto Belt's great as well because you're going to get in their face, right? You're going to speed in with your Shirelias, get right on top of them, and then hit them with all those Proto Belt bolts. Kind of like Fizz. When you get in close, you hit them with all those bolts. That's a lot of extra damage on a really low cooldown. So a 40-second cooldown. So that makes him powerful faster in the game than he should be right now. And that's why you're seeing him take over a lot of games, is because he can get both of these cheap items. So while they're saving up, either charging up their Rod of the Ages, or still getting tier, or even getting Luden's, their power curve just got a lot worse, especially with the nerfs to mana, the nerfs to tier, the nerfs to Lost Chapter. Everybody else has much, much lower power curves, except for Vlad now. So that makes him really, really strong. And even things like Zhonya's are relatively cheap compared to some other items. And now you'll notice also that a lot of people are going Predator on him. This is kind of the new hotness, especially since they nerfed Unsealed Spellbook on this patch. Then the inspiration tree is not as inspiring anymore, for a terrible pun there. But yeah, it's not as good. So you'll find him going Predator now, which is really interesting. So that gives him that extra ghost to run in on the backline. So now with Shirelia's Predator, he's definitely getting on the backline. And this does allow him to roam to side lanes as well, which I just talked about historically is one of his problems in keeping up with some other mid laners that can roam faster than he can. Well, now he's going to be really fast with Shirelia's and Predator. And then they end up taking Ingenious Hunter, which is great. I love this rune. It's a lot of fun. But you got to remember that Predator goes on boots and counts as an item cooldown. So Ingenious Hunter actually affects Predator. If you've been paying attention to the meta, you'll know this has been a thing recently with champions, particularly Olaf, who will run Predator, and Skarner, who can run Ingenious Hunter. Well, now you've got it with Vlad. And Vlad uses it even better than they do, because not only does he benefit from Predator, but look at all of his core items, right? We've got Proto Belt here. Okay, that's an item active. Shirelia's item active. Zhonya's item active. So he has 4 different items that benefit from Ingenious Hunter, and they're all very powerful, right? Like, these interactions are really strong interactions for Vlad. So that's just insanely good on Vladimir, right? Because this is giving him, these two give him the health, they give him the AP, they give him the utility. He already has really high damage. And now he gets to benefit from all of that off of Ingenious Hunter, right? And he already has a lot of healing, so he doesn't need Ravenous Hunter. It's nice, but, his Hemo Plague and his Q, everything's going to be healing him a lot. So that's good. Then you can kind of choose what you want after that. You can go for the Celerity Scorch if you want harassment in lane, but you can also go into the Resolve tree if you want to be a little bit tankier and still go something like Bone Plating and Chrysalis. So he does have some different options when he does. It looks like most people go Sorcery on him. For the Scorch plus Celerity, because, once again, the move speed is good. And I just thought about this, once you start jacking up your move speed with Predator plus Shirelia's, the Celerity is going to give you a ton of extra AP also. So that's actually really good. Yeah, I'd probably go Celerity most of the time on him. And that's what I did list here. So, Vlad, very, very nice. Definitely watch him. I suspect we might even see him in pro play a little bit more right now. He's kind of hard to play, but not really mechanically. It's just like decision making. So you can figure that out pretty quickly if you put some reps on him. So he has a lot of lane pressure. He has kind of average kill pressure at level 6. He can do a lot of damage, but he's not as likely to kill somebody as Zed or Fizz. Very, very safe. He has sustain in lane. He's almost always going to be topped off. And he has the pull, of course, to not only have a dash to get away, but also makes him untargetable, which gets him out of a lot of situations. His scaling is very, very high, as we talked about before. Really nice AP ratios, tons of AoE damage, very, very strong team fighter, and he can also split pretty well later on, but his team fight is amazing. Then his reliability is about average. You can mess him up for sure if you chain your stuff together wrong, or you just don't understand your limits. You get caught out and killed. But he's not as hard to play as something like a Zed is. So he's very good against a lot of these assassins, like Katarina, Fizz, and Zed, but he can have a problem still with some of these other sustained mages, like Aurelion Sol and Swain, are kind of iffy matchups for him. If you see somebody who's really good playing something like a Cassiopeia Rise or a Zir, that can be a problem. You're not going to see those as much at Plat Minus, at least not proficient players playing those. And then I think Anivia is supposed to be kind of a problem, because Anivia can push him in, and if she lands her stun, she can potentially evaporate him. I can't remember, but I feel like Anivia is good against him. Precisely. But he doesn't have a lot of really weak champions that he gets matched up against right now, outside of some of those other high sustain AP champions that are falling out of the meta right now. So yeah, really good. You want to go Irelia, or Ionian Boots, Shirelias, Protobelt, Zanyas. Okay, let's keep going. See if we can get it at 45. So yeah, he's a newcomer. It's really strong. Talon, also becoming very popular. Now, he's one of the highest win rate champions as well. So Vlad's kind of down in here. He's top 10. People can mess him up, but he is very, very strong. Talon is super high up the list. He's almost the number 1. He's fighting Aurelion Sol for it. He has a higher pick rate than Sol. He has like 3 times the pick rate. 2 times the pick rate. And that's because there's not a lot of counterplay. If he gets really far ahead, he just completely blows people up, and his numbers are bonkers if you look at him. So he doesn't have as much outplay potential as Zed. A really top-end player who's good on Talon and Zed is probably going to favor Zed a lot of the time. So he doesn't have the outplay potential, but at the same time, he can't be outplayed by the enemy as much as Talon. There's very little counterplay to this champion. He's one of the definitions of a toxic assassin, I think, from a balance standpoint, because he's either completely worthless or he's just overpoweringly strong in a given meta, right? Because there's so little counterplay. Because he goes invisible, you can't even see him anymore with control wards, and he can just pop over walls. Like, if he pops over a wall and he has 1 or 2 items and you're like a Janna, you're dead, probably. You might be able to blow everything and get away with your ult, but if you're if you're like a Nami or a Lulu or whatever, you're probably going to die. There's just very, very little counterplay to this guy when he gets ahead. And he roams really, really well. So he's one of the best roaming assassins right now. Especially, like I said, these other champions like Talia, like Rise, like Galio just aren't roaming as much. And it's harder to push the lane for these champions as well so that they can go roam. Well, Talon still has really good wave clear for an assassin with his Rake. So he can push that wave pretty quickly, has fairly low mana costs on most of his abilities. This is only 30 mana to initiate his combo. Like, his wave clear caps out at 75 mana. So he definitely does not have mana problems. And that allows him to push and roam, and he's very, very good at that Clown Fiesta, So this is his time right now with the Ninja Tabi nerf, Locket nerf to a lot of these other high-pressure champions that can push him in and poke him out early on. That's going to make him extremely strong. He's got 200% AD ratio on his passive, which is just insane. If we think about just jumping on someone from the full 575 distance, he gets that 110% range. If he happens to be in someone's face when this comes off cooldown, and he kills them like that, so if he's able to jump on them, like, off of a wall without needing to use this as a gap closer, 330, well, that's with Infinity Edge. So without Infinity Edge, it's still pretty crazy. He's not going to get Infinity Edge. 247 here, and then the 165% here. So a lot of damage on most of his abilities. His ult is 200% AD, so that's a lot of 200% in his kit. So he just does a ton of damage. And one thing that not a lot of people were talking about in the patch notes, is actually a really big deal, is they changed this back to 575. It was only activating, I think, at 525 range, so he gets a free 50 range. They were calling it a bug fix, but that's really, really important because that's his engage range. It was 500. So he got 75 range on being able to engage on somebody, which is astronomical. That's so huge. So he just got a direct, huge buff. His base damage on his passive is just insanely high. I mean, look at this. It goes to 245 from 175 as he levels up. His ultimate got an extra 100% or extra 20% from 80% scaling. And remember, this hits people twice a lot of the time. So that's not just 20%, that's 40%. Extra AD ratio. So they have buffed him a lot. These are massive buffs. His damage in 8.6 and you just saw a 75 increase in Noxian Diplomacy, and Ninja Taba got nerfed, and Locket got nerfed, and all of the tanks got nerfed and blown out of the meta, and all of the other mages had all of their mana destroyed, so they can't push him in, they can't challenge him early, they're not going to have enough mana to push and roam to follow him. So this is a very, very good meta for Talon. I mean, there's definitely an argument for Talon being number 1 right now. It's really hard because all of these are good in their own different ways. I just have him a little bit lower because, unlike the others, he is super, super snowball dependent. If you fall behind early, then it's really hard to get back into the game. Also, he's very unsafe in lane, so he can dodge and run over walls. He's mobile like that. But if you get caught out like in the middle of a lane by a gank and you're pre-6, you're going to die. So he is susceptible to crowd control. He doesn't have anything that makes him go untargetable like Fizz, like Zed, like Vlad. And so that's why I have him down a little bit lower. His raw damage and his hyper-scaling capabilities are extremely strong, but he's not as good. He's not as safe, and also he's not as good in team fights because, you know, usually he goes in and just trades all of his damage, single target, and just blows somebody up, and then he doesn't have anything, like any other way to escape in a team fight unless he, like, I guess he can jump over a wall and run away again. But once again, that requires you to be close to a wall. There are a lot of walls around the map, but his doesn't have the same tricks up his sleeve as something like a Fizz, a Zed, or a Vladimir. But nevertheless, if you just want raw power and you just want to snowball games, this is like one of the best booster champions right now. He's so, so strong. So his lane pressure is kind of high because he can push in, he can kill people pre-6. Not super likely, but he can do it. Once he hits 6, it's definitely top of the charts. Like, he's one of the most dangerous champions to kill you at 6 because there's very little counterplay to him. You know, you can dodge a Fizz fish in some ways with Zed. You can, like, crowd control him after he ults, or you can interact with him some way. You can flash after he ults or something to get away from him, right? But with Talon, when he engages on top of you, you know, Noxian Diplomacy, rakes, and then ult, you're dead. And he's going to run you down. Even if you flash after that, you're going to get hit by the second splay of blades when he closes them in and jumps on you again. So it's just really, really hard to get away from him. So he isn't as safe, he has pretty high scaling, and his reliability is okay. He's not as hard to play as other assassins, but, you know, he is still kind of on the challenging side. So once again, great matchup against the squishy champions that don't have a lot of CC, that don't really want to be building arm guard early. And then he has a hard time against tanks or health stackers. So like Malphite, Galio, Vlad are all going to be rough for him. Then he has kind of the same Electrocute suite here. He likes to go Relentless Hunter so he can roam faster. And then because he doesn't have mana problems, Ulti Hat's really strong on him. And then, of course, Celerity for that extra move speed's good. And then sort of like Zed, just Dustblade, Ghostblade, depending on what you need. There is definitely an argument for Ghostblade, especially if you're overkilling people early. And if you're going to roam, then Ghostblade's pretty good. Dustblade is really good for making sure that you kill your lane person because he can very comfortably proc Dustblade twice, right? If you just jump on him with Noxian Diplomacy, hit him, that procs it once, you ult, turn invisible, you're going to proc it again. So he gets double procs really easily. A little bit easier than Zed. So very good. Less counterplay than Zed, less safe, less outplay potential on both sides. So if you just want that linear, one-sided, I'm going to go 10-0 or 0-10, then Talon's going to be your champ. Okay, next up we've got Aurelion Sol. So Aurelion Sol is kind of an odd duck. I'll close a couple of these here. Aurelion Sol is a little bit of an odd duck, but it is becoming his time to shine right now. He statistically has been one of the highest mid laners for a long time now, but he has a very low play rate, so it's under 2%. And the reason is his kit is just so weird. It's so different from any other champion in the game that you really have to one-trick him to really understand him because you need to... It's just so sort of counterintuitive where you need to position yourself so that your orbs are hitting people. So you don't want to be too far away, but you also don't want to be too close. And just striking that balance and trying to figure out what are they going to do. Are they going to try to get in your face? Are they going to try to run? How are you going to position to play around that? On top of the fact that his Star Surge... is pretty easy to dodge. He's a fairly slow-moving champion when he's, like, running at you, so there is some outplay potential. So you kind of have to choose when am I going to try to charge this up. He does have really good roaming with the Comet of Legend, but you have to determine, like, when you start this, because you can't turn, you have to determine, it's almost like a skill shot, where are they going to be when you come rolling up with this Comet. And if they're paying attention or they have wards, they can see you coming in. So you can charge up this Star Surge to get it massive by the time you land with that Comet of Legend. But there's also quite a bit of outplay, so you have to be thinking where they're going to be. So it's kind of like trying to land like an Ashe Arrow or a Jinx ult or an Ezreal ult, you know, from halfway across the map whenever you roll in with Aurelion Sol charging up a Star Surge. So it's really hard to predict that, especially from that far away when you're trying to land. So these things make him really weird to play, but he does not have huge mana problems early on. He can just get a Rod of the Ages and be fine. He doesn't have to get tier. He has really, really high sustained damage. If you look at his stars here and how much this extra damage that you get, it's really high. If you look at level 11, that's about 100 per star that hits them. And then you get plus a certain amount. I don't know what that plus is based on, but I don't know. You get like an extra 25, 22, or 25 at that point. So that would be 122, and then like if you have 100 AP, then that'd be an extra 42. So you know, it's somewhere in the mid game, somewhere between probably like 150 to 250 damage per rotating star, right? And there's 3 of them, and so it's just 1, 2, 3. And that's like 500 to 700 damage just off of this, and it's AOE. It affects everybody in a fight. So he has really, really good team fight presence. He has really good wave clear because of that, especially as the game goes on, and as they're nerfing wave clear on everybody else. You know, the fact that he has really cheap wave clear is going to make him a lot stronger. He also has deceptively really high base stats. I mean, he has like almost 2,200 health for a squishy champion. If you compare that to, let's look up someone else random here. Who's popular right now? Let's just see. Let's look at like a, I don't know, a Talia or something like that. We got Thresh. Let's look at Talia. So she gets up to about 2,000, but she has pretty low starting base health, and she's going to be a little bit lower than Aurelion Sol. So he has pretty high base damages, pretty high base health, and he's got that 562 health. So his base stats are high, he has nice scaling, and he's very good against assassins because he stacks so much health. Like I mentioned before, he gets Rod of the Ages, Rylai's, and Leandries. That's 3 health items that he gets. So he's deceptively very difficult to kill. He can slow people with the Rylai's to kite them pretty well. And this actually has an insane range if you look at it. Like, you think of it primarily as getting used. Can you guys actually see that little toy that my wife put up there? Yeah. You can actually push people back with it, so it knocks people back to the outer edge of your expansion, which I think is 650 outer limit. So you basically push people back for 650. Does a ton of damage with a decent amount of damage with a nice ratio, but it has 1500 range, so you can snipe people from really far away with this, and it has a very low cooldown. So he has a lot of aspects of his kit that a lot of people just don't understand that well because he doesn't get played a lot. So he's really strong. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of him in pro play with Vlad specifically. Like you'll see both of those champions, I think, a bit more once the pros start playing on patch 8.9. Oh no, there it goes. But yeah. So really good sustained damage, really good roam, great push and roam character that Riot is trying to stop every other character from doing. He still does it very well. Excellent scaling, excellent against assassins. So really, really good. He's just a bit further down my list. He's not as safe in lane. He doesn't have anything to get out of gank pressure. He's very difficult to pull off and play. Maybe not mechanically, but as far as like decision making and timing, it can be pretty difficult. But he is definitely a force to be reckoned with. I just have him a little bit lower because his power spike is slower, right? He has to charge up that Rod of the Ages. He has to, you know, get a few of his items together and get some more levels under him. He can't kill people at 6 like Fizz and Zed can, and he doesn't have those cheap items that he can use to sort of cheat the power curve like Vlad can. He doesn't have the raw power of Talon, but he is very, very strong. So if you are really proficient, if you're really good on Aurelion Sol, or you want to learn a control mage in the mid lane, this is a great time to play him. He gets very little attention from Riot as well, so that makes him a good candidate for a one-trick champion. I don't think he's been changed significantly in quite a while. In fact, he got a buff back in 7.2.4. He doesn't get played a lot in pro play because of all of that outplay potential that I mentioned before, where people can see him coming and play around, you know, his stun and his other mechanics. But there have been pro players that have used him very, very well. I think He is one, and there's someone else in Korea that used him very well. But he's hard to play, but he's definitely worth learning. I don't expect him to get a lot of nerfs or to see a lot of pro play, although, you'll, like I said, you'll see an uptick a little bit maybe with him, but very good time to learn him. Okay, so yeah, lots of lane pressure, lots of kill threat. Not lots of kill threat, but like average kill threat, average safety, very good scaling, and fairly low reliability. So I think he's strong against other sort of sustained damage champions, the Vlad, Ekko, Swain, and then he's weak against some of these all-in champions that can blow him up, like Talon, Fizz, and Veigar. He doesn't have any way to get out of a Veigar cage, so that can be problematic as well. So not having any sort of movement, like quick movement dashes, is a problem in this day and age. But if you can position correctly, he's very strong. So he gets some kind of oddball runes. You know, I see a lot of people getting like Phase Rush, Nullifying Orb, Celerity, Water Walking, so you can roam better, Minion Dematerializer. I'm not sure about that. I guess just so he can push faster, and then Time Warp Tonic. I really don't understand the Materializer and Time Warp Tonic. But that's pretty much what everybody gets on him. So I'm not a one-trick, specialist in this, but everybody gets this Time Warp. I guess it's so you can move faster. It does give you that 5% move speed, so you can arrive faster when you pop a potion. So it just allows you to push and roam a little bit faster, I suppose. This is pretty much what everybody gets. So it's kind of oddball runes, but pretty strong. And then you want to max your W, of course, there. Okay, let's go ahead and keep moving here. Looks like it's probably going to be about an hour. But I do want to spend quite a lot of time. I don't want to just throw out a tier list and say, this is good, that's good, that's good. I want to try to give you some kind of explanation for these things and how they're trending in the meta. So Katarina, going to be really strong. Now, she's nice in this meta as well because she has a ton of damage. She has a lot of kill threat at 6, and she's AP. So remember, AP assassins get a high premium right now because of so much AD in the jungle and top lane. As I keep saying, it's very, very important to remember that's a crucial meta consideration. Okay, so Katarina historically has had a lot of problems in the laning phase because she can get pushed out. She doesn't have very good wave clear early. She's melee. And so champions that can, push her into tower or threaten her early are going to have an advantage. But guess what? A lot of those champions have been nerfed, right? So a lot of those ranged champions are just not going to be seen as much. You're not going to be seeing as many Talias, Orianas, things like that. So this is really, really good for her because if she gets a free pass in the laning phase, which is increasingly becoming a thing, then she is very, very scary. She has one of the scariest single item power spikes in the whole game. Now it's a bit more expensive than something like Vlad's, 2100 on Shirelia's, but it's a lot more impactful, and that's Gunblade. So she's one of the few champions that will get this item still. And the reason is she has this really wacky old school scaling where she has really high bonus AD ratios and high AP ratios, right? So if you look at this, that's 100% bonus AD and 100% AP and a really high base number that goes up to 240 whenever she picks up a dagger on somebody, and lots of her abilities drop daggers. So that's a lot of damage over time. And if we look at Gunblade, look at Hextech Gunblade. Oh, look at this. It has a lot of ability power and attack damage, and it heals you for a lot of things, and it adds another really high burst damage ability that slows people down. So that slow is really crucial because it allows you to just channel your ult, and they can't walk out of it. They're going to die before they can walk out of it if you've already Gunbladed them. So they're going to have to use a flash or a dash to escape. And her ultimate also applies Grievous Wounds, which is very good against Vlad and Swain because they heal a lot. So she's just becoming increasingly very powerful in this meta for a lot of different reasons. She can't get pushed out very easily. She has a really nice one-item power spike when all the other power spikes are getting nerfed, right? When you're getting your Ludens getting nerfed, you're getting your Tyr getting nerfed. Rod of the Ages is going to take a while to come online. This is a very strong item, and she's one of the only people that really leverages this. LeBlanc used to do this, but they changed the way that her W interacts with lifesteal, I believe. No, it was her, when she queued somebody and then spread that passive to everybody, it used to count as single target, so you'd get a ton of healing off of it, and that's why people started going Gunblade on LeBlanc. They changed all that with the revert, so you don't want to go Gunblade on LeBlanc anymore. But it is still very, very good. And really, it's just Katarina and Akali, because Akali has nice AD-AP ratios as well. Akali's mostly a top laner, though. She needs a bit more room to do her thing. But, yeah, so she has a really, really strong single-item power spike, and just insane scaling with her damage. If she doesn't get pushed in, she's going to do a ton. I mean, look at this. It's up to 700. I mean, even at level 11, it's 562 damage with 330% bonus AD and 285% AP. That is just an unheard of, ludicrous amount of damage. And this is why she one-shots people in team fights. And that can hit 3 different people in a team fight. So if she gets ahead, if she gets, one item up on somebody, or even just a half item up, then she can completely obliterate not only single target, but entire team fights because she gets all of these resets. And so she's probably, if she's really fed, she's probably the scariest champion on this list. Especially if the enemy doesn't have a lot of CC. How much CC do you have on these champions? Not much. Spoiler alert, there's not much CC going on here. Rakan, which we'll talk about in a second, has a very good matchup against her. Twisted Fate can gold card her, so Twisted Fate's pretty good against her. Sol can blow her back with his ult. So there are a couple of champions, but some of these guys are going to have a really hard time dealing with her if she gets ahead. So she just has insane scaling, great for team fights, great for assassination. Okay safety. I'm actually going to lower the safety just a little bit because she can't really jump back unless she already has a dagger prepped. So she can hop around a lot in fights, but it's really hard for her to get away. Can she... I'm trying to remember if she can shunpo to target... Okay, so she can shunpo to her own creeps. She can't shunpo to a ward anymore. They changed that back in the day. Okay, so if she can shunpo backward to her creeps... I don't know. I'm still going to keep her at a 2 because she has to have creeps behind her to shunpo back, and she just doesn't have a lot of defensive capabilities. So if the enemy team has a lot of CC and they focus on her, then it can be kind of tough. But if they don't, then she's going to be really strong. So not a ton of pressure in lane, but really high kill threat at 5. Kind of weak safety and then insane scaling, and she's probably one of the hardest champions in the game to play. So kind of like a lot of these other top mid laners, you need to put a lot of time in on her. You have to have your daggers in the right place at the right time, and you have to jump around. So very, very difficult to play. That's why she's a bit further down the list. But is really strong, especially as an AP champion in a meta that's increasingly becoming defined by AD champions. Okay, Rakan is probably the spiciest pick on here, and I know a lot of people are going to say, Rakan, what the... Now, I'm not trying to all caps vid you here. I legit think that Rakan is a top 10 mid laner right now for several reasons. And let's talk about sort of what's changed. I get asked about this a lot. I know a lot of people might skip specifically to this section because they want to know what this is all about if they don't have time to watch the whole video. So, what's up with Rakan? Well, he recently got extra AP ratios on his passive, got an extra AP ratio, I believe, on his Q, and an extra AP ratio on his W. So, and he got an extra jump distance on his battle dance, which is really important. That 100 range is big. So he nerfed his interaction with Xayah, but in mid lane, he's not going to be interacting with Xayah. So historically, one of his problems as a support, unless you're with a Xayah and you both leveled up W at level 1 and went for an all-in cheese, he's pretty weak in the laning phase. And that's why professionally you almost never see him with anybody except for Xayah. When Kalista was really strong, he would be played with Kalista because they could have the double knock-up combo with Kalista's ult and his ult before she got nerfed into the dirt. So that was a thing. But by and large, you would only see him in professional play paired up with Xayah because his laning phase is awful. And they have buffed this a little bit, so they increased the range. It used to be 800. They increased the range to 900 on Gleaming Quill, and that was probably early on in the season. But this is a really slender skill shot. It's kind of difficult to land, and it has a really low cooldown early on of the 12 seconds. Now, it does okay damage. I mean, 250 is legit, and it actually heals you whenever you attack. Now, this can heal just you, too. So he heals himself and his allies for a certain amount, but it does have a 0.7 ratio. So the amount healed is not crazy early on, but it does have a nice ratio. This, once again, is not a crazy amount early, but it does have a great ratio. So if you can stack, the thought process here is, if you can stack a lot of AP on Rakan, he can do an astronomical amount of damage because he has such just through-the-roof ratios on everything, right? Now, maybe not as crazy as, like, Katarina, but you have to keep in mind, Rakan has a lot of utility, So if you can get him through the laning phase, he's always been a great champion in the mid and the late game, in the bot lane. So just think about that, like having the utility, having that support in the mid lane that also does a ton of damage. So we aren't seeing that played a ton yet, widespread, but I have seen some people on streams playing this recently. Like we've got one here with Huhi. Now he ended up losing this game, but this is the kind of thing that you're going to be seeing a little bit more. So he still mostly played a support, but you're seeing Here's one with perks where he went 8-1. You're seeing this a little bit more where people will max the Q, then they'll max the W second, and they'll just leave the shield at level 1. The shield still has a great AP ratio, it's just the cooldown's going to be a little bit less, right? And so he can run Electrocute. You can proc this pretty easily, especially once you get to 6. You ult in, W, that's 2 hits, and then it's auto attack, and that's your 3rd hit. You get sudden impact for that extra magic penetration, the same as all the other assassins. But he can also run Ingenious Hunter so that he gets his proto belts on a shorter cooldown. And I don't know if he runs any other activatables. The proto belt being on a short cooldown is nice, but it's similar in concept to something like a Fizz, right? Where you just, or like a Vlad, where you jump in their face. And then you proc that proto belt point blank, hit him with all the bolts, and that adds a lot of extra damage to your rotation. And the fact that he gets to cheat on that, right? That he's getting this really cheap item that's faster than a lot of other items. Now, some people are going Ludens. I don't know why people don't run Shirelia's mid lane on him. It seems like if you could run the Shirelia's plus proto belt, that'd be really good. But you probably do need at least 1 mana item, so I guess people are getting that Ludens. And that gives you extra burst damage. And it gives you 20% CDR, which is really nice. So if you get, Ionian boots, Ludens, proto belt, then you're going to have your 40% CDR, which is very good. But what positions him really well outside of just being like a cheap version of Fizz is the fact that he has all that utility, particularly that he has that charm that is just, you just press R, and if someone's trying to get in your face, they're going to get charmed, right? That has great utility against a lot of these melee assassins. So Zed tries to ult you, you just press your ult, boom, he's charmed right when you land, you full combo him, blow him up, and he's not going to be able to do much to you because he's not going to be, like, as soon as he shows up on top of you with his mark, he's not going to be able to add on any extra damage. Fizz has a little bit less interaction. You can dodge a lot of stuff really easily with that W, though. Fizz tries to fish you, you can pop to the side really quickly. So he has a lot of ability to dodge different skill shots. If people get in his face, he can ult, charm them, stop a lot of their damage. And he's really nice in gauge. If you notice what I was talking about earlier, we're seeing Graves, Kha'Zix, Master Yi out of the jungle. None of these guys engage. A lot of the engaged tanks have been nerfed a lot when you're thinking about like a Sejuani, or even historically something like a Gragas. A lot of these champions don't have a good way to engage. A lot of the best supports right now are not engaged supports, right? So if we're thinking about, like Janna, Nami, Soraka's becoming more popular again with this new like Max E build that I talk about in the support tier list. A lot of these champions can't engage. Top laners, same deal, right? We're seeing, Darius. We're seeing a lot of Camille, Fiora, Irelia. A lot of these champions just do not have great engages. Now, Irelia kind of can with her ult, but the engages are shaky. We don't have the tanks as much now that are going to be able to reliably hard engage. Well, Rakan can fit that role. When he just ults in, he can start a fight for his whole team. He has that great utility of being able to charm the entire enemy team, jump around with his shield, just do his typical Rakan things, just he's going to do a lot more damage. His shields are going to be a lot more massive also. So he's just really well positioned in this meta right now because he does respectable damage. He still has terrible lane pressure, but like a lot of these other melee assassin types, people aren't going to be pushing into him as much. They're not going to have the wave clear to push him in and pressure him under tower. And he has okay kill threat once he gets to 6. He's very, very safe. He's able to get away with his W. He's able to jump to people with his E. And he's able to tag somebody with his R and run away. So he's extremely safe. His scaling is very high. He has really high AP ratio. So not only does he do really strong damage, but he's going to have massive shields as well. And he's pretty reliable. Like, he's not super hard to play once you get used to him. So I think he's good against these melee champions. He's very good against Yasuo because Yasuo is not going to stop his combo. He can just dash right through that wind wall when he engages on Yasuo and blow him up. So he has really nice matchups against like Katarina, Zed, and Yasuo, who are all becoming a lot more popular. Now, he is weak against Morgana, Malzahar, and Galio, but a lot of people aren't playing a lot of these hard CC champs mid lane. Like, you might see Morg occasionally in the mid lane, right? But Malzahar, you're not seeing him anymore. He's been nerfed a lot. His wave clear just got hit really hard by the nerf to these mana items. And Galio's kind of fallen out of the meta too. So he's really good in an assassin meta. Once again, he's AP as well, which is very good. He's great in an assassin meta where people aren't playing tanks and don't have reliable engage. He can fill that niche while also filling the assassin niche. So you can be assassin and hard engage team fighter, which is probably going to become overpowered if people refine his build, his power spikes, and practice him a bit more at pro play. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him at pro play. He has all the hallmarks, mid lane that is, all the hallmarks of someone who could be good mid lane and pro play. So yeah, people are just going the standard electrocute into Ingenious Hunter and then bone plating and revitalize, and then Sork Boots, Protobelt, Luden's Death Cap. So yeah, he's a spicy pick. He does have a nice win rate. If you notice here, he's creeping up to about 52%, very low play rate. People still aren't trying him out. Looks kind of like a troll pick. I thought it was too until I saw it in some of my games. It's for real. It's a very, very scary pick for people that have practiced it a little bit. So expect to see a lot more of that. He's not going to be on a lot of tier lists right now. He's not getting a ton of visibility. There were some all caps YouTube videos that, featured him a little bit, but he's still very good. All right. And the final couple of picks, then we'll move on here so we can try to keep this to about an hour. Ekko, going to be really strong right now. He does have really high ratios. He's on the tricky side to play, but he is very good against assassins, which is why I have him up pretty high, even though his win rate is not insane. It's about average. Just the kind of stuff that we're seeing right now is going to make him good if you practice him a lot. He is a booster type of champion. He's extremely hard to play, like most things on this list. Unfortunately, I think that's actually good for the game. It rewards you for learning champions in depth, to have the best champions be the hardest ones to play. So I don't mind that too much. Once again, huge ratios, 0.8. You'll notice this on a lot of these champions, right? They have really high ratios, especially on their passives. Then you can get up to a 0.9 on your Time Winder. Parallel Convergence gives 150% AP for the shield. And then his Chrono Break does 150% AP damage, really high base, and heals himself basically to full whenever he does it. And changes his position. And if he just Chrono Breaks and then dashes back through Parallel Convergence, even if he doesn't land on the Parallel Convergence, if he just goes through it, then he stuns people wherever he lands. So he's really hard to play because you have to keep track of where his shadow is, or whatever they call it, his hologram. You have to keep track of where that is to make sure that you land on people and blow them up with the Chrono Break damage. But just the fact that he can heal, if you don't 100% delete him, then he's going to heal back up to full health. This is why Tank Ekko was so toxic several seasons ago, until they nerfed. I think he used to have AD ratios. They nerfed something about it. I don't remember exactly what it was, but this makes him very good against a lot of assassins, especially that have predictable damage. So like a Zed, or, a Fizz, or some of these other champions, as soon as they do their front-loaded damage, then he can ult and erase all of that damage. And his cooldown is going to be, on this, is going to be similar to what a lot of the other assassin cooldowns are, if not a little bit lower. So he's got a great shield to protect him. He has this great self-heal on a low cooldown, and he also does just a massive, massive amount of damage. Now, he can't roam as well as some of the other champions out there, but roaming has been nerfed. He can't wave clear as well, but wave clear has been nerfed. So this positions him really well, particularly against other AP assassins out there, and he really does like to get Zhonya's Hourglass as well, which makes him good against Zed and Talon. So he's very, very good. If you've seen a good Ekko in your game, you know that this guy can definitely take over. So I think he's fantastic right now. That's why I have him down at the tier 2. Now, he's not as reliable as some of these other top-end picks. He's not going to have as much kill pressure at 6. He's not going to have the same level of team fighting capability. He can be good in team fights. It's just he's a little bit more shaky than some of these other picks. But if you are very, very good on him, he could very easily be up in the tier 1. So, really, really strong pick. Twisted Fate, I think, is starting to make a little bit of a resurgence because a lot of the other laners have been nerfed once again. So other wave clear and roam champions have been nerfed except for him. He doesn't need a lot of extra mana items, right? Sometimes he gets Rod of the Ages. In fact, a lot of times he gets Rod, but he doesn't have to get Tier. He can still push really well. He has blue card for the mana regen. They just changed the way that towers interact with magic damage, so his, Witchbane is going to be shredding towers even faster. He has a gold card, which is really good against assassins, most of them. Not as good against Fizz, but against a lot of these other assassins, if he gold cards them, it makes them very easy to gank. He has great kill pressure and gank assist. and that gives him a little bit of time to get away from people, and he does pretty respectable damage. So his damage is going to be lower than a lot of these other assassins out there, but he makes up for that with his wave clear, with his tower taking ability, and with his ability to roam. So Twisted Fate, always very good in solo queue. He's great at the Fiesta. It's just a huge threat. Like, it's hard to even put down wards as a support when the Twisted Fate is fed, because he can just pop up on you anywhere. If he spots you on a ward, if you're trying to clear a pink ward, he can just appear right on top of you and kill you. So it just requires a lot of coordination to play around him. No one can ever be isolated, or they're going to get picked off and killed. And so he just puts a lot of constraints on the enemy to try to play around him. So he's really strong. The last one that I want to mention here is Swain. Now, Swain has been nerfed a lot recently, but he's still going to be extremely strong if you look at his numbers. Very similar to a Vlad. The way that I like to think of Vlad compared to Swain, I think that Vlad does more. He has an easier time getting to the back line. He does more AoE damage faster. He has higher burst damage. But he doesn't have as much CC as Vlad, as Swain, because he doesn't have any CC. So he can get to that back line and tear it up. But I feel like he has to be a little bit more ahead. Swain is better if he's behind. He's not better if he's behind, but he's better than Vlad if he's behind, I mean to say. So, and he has probably a better laning phase. He has better push. Vlad does. He does rely on mana, so he is going to get hit by those mana changes, which is unfortunate. Usually he's fine with just a Rod of the Ages, though. He doesn't have to get a tier or anything like that. But he has really high numbers here. I mean, 324 damage with a 0.96 ratio is excellent. Heals for a lot of percentage of his max health. Gets a lot of free HP off of his ultimate. Has a lot of sustain off of that. And then he has lots of different crowd control. So he's got this never move. He can, pull people forward with his Ravenous Flock passive. So he's still really good. I'm sure people have played against Swain, by now. He just has a ton of damage, ton of sustain. Very good against other assassins because, he stacks a lot of health. He can get an Hourglass fairly comfortably early on. He wants to get it. Has a great interaction with his ult. So he provides pretty good lane pressure, good kill threat. Reasonable safety because he does stay topped off pretty well. But he doesn't have any flashes, dashes, things that make him untargetable outside of Zhonya's. So his safety is a little on the low side. He can get ganked and killed. His scaling is really high, and he's pretty reliable. He's one of the easier champions to play on this list. Certainly compared to something like a Katarina or a Zed, he's going to be a lot easier. So this is pretty good. If you get auto-filled mid and you want to, learn a champion, then he's one of the better ones to learn. I think some of the easier ones to learn how to play on this list, if you really want to put some time into them, it'd be something like a Rakan, a Twisted Fate, a Swain, maybe a Vlad. None of them are real easy. I mean, none of them are Annie, but those are some of the simpler ones compared to the other ones if you just want to practice and have something proficient for this patch. Okay, that's it for the top 10. Other honorable mentions that I'll just talk about just really quickly here. LeBlanc is really good. I know a lot of other tier lists will have her up higher than this, but my problem with LeBlanc is her wave clear is a little bit more suspect after the changes. She's a bit more mana reliant. She does get Ludens now, but that lowers her power spike. She doesn't have the same Gunblade power spike that she used to have with the changes. She's very reliant on hitting those chains, which is a very slender skill shot, so there's a lot of outplay potential from other champions. Anyone that can dash can get out of the chains also. So she is a bit safer. If she gets really far ahead, she does have some of the longest assassination ranges in the game because she can jump twice and then pick someone off and then warp back. So she can basically, if she's fed, if you're on the same screen as she is and you're a squishy champion, she can delete you. So she's still very good if you're good on her. I just think she's a little bit less reliable than some of these other picks. Yasuo is another one who's gaining a lot of power in the mid lane. Conqueror's extremely strong on him. I think he's better in the top lane, but he's still viable in the mid lane. His problem is, Yasuo's tend to want to 1v5 a lot, which is sort of just a personality thing that attracts people to Yasuo. But in general, he is a very unsafe champion, right? He doesn't have a lot of flashes or dashes to get him out. He kind of has to just maneuver around creep waves. So that makes him very vulnerable. His ultimate leaves opportunity for counterplay from enchanters. Janna can blow people back. They can shield him. So he's very susceptible to disruption from enchanters that are all very popular right now. But if left alone, he obviously does a ton of damage, and that wind wall is very good in ranged matchups. So it's extremely good against something like a Twisted Fate in particular. It's good against Katarina and her ult. But a lot of these other champions, really, these top champions are not going to be that affected by Wind Wall. You know, he's better against kind of that old guard of champions where he could absorb a lot of their projectiles. So if you're going to play him, you know, I would say pocket pick him against something like a Twisted Fate or maybe a Katarina. But he's extremely hard to play like a lot of the other champs on this list. Anivia has problems with mana, but she can still push in really well. She can't roam, but other people aren't going to be able to roam as much either. And she's still kind of the queen of siege. And the fact that she has that stun is really nice against some of these assassins. And she can definitely delete squishy. She does a ton of damage on her E. So she has pretty good matchups against things like Katarina. Probably pretty good matchup against... I think she has a good matchup against Vlad. I'm not 100% about that. But she's still going to be a fairly strong champ. Morgana is very popular statistically right now. You know, she's the 4th highest win rate. My problem with Morgana is I just don't feel like she has enough horsepower. She can push people into tower really easily, and she does have pretty good matchups against assassins. So, you know, could definitely be an argument for her being in the top couple of tiers here. But she just doesn't have enough raw power. You know, people can outplay her a lot. Her Black Shield doesn't offer any protection against Talon or Zed. It can be broken pretty easily, even by something like, you know, like a Fizz. A lot of these champions are going to do so much excess damage. And especially like the sustained ones, like a Swain or a Vlad, aren't really going to care if she Black Shields somebody. They're just going to do more damage over time. So if you have a team that, you know, already has just a ton of damage, you just need some more utility, then she can be a decent pick. She does push. She did go to a lot of mana regen early, so she can push in easily with her W. I just feel like she just doesn't have enough horsepower in this meta. You just really need super high damage champions in the mid lane for the most part. And, you know, if you want to play something that's utility, I would probably rather play Rakan, because he still does pretty respectable damage, and he's just a lot more reliable than she is. Karthus is someone else who's seeing a lot of play right now. He's very susceptible to assassins, though. He can get Zhonya's later on. He is a tier stacker, which did just get nerfed. I think he goes tier and rod, which means he's going to be extremely slow. A lot of these champions come out really fast out of the gate. You know, the Fizz, the Zed, Talon, Katarina, and they can just delete him before he ever gets on board. And a lot of these champions do have interactions to dodge his ult as well. So, like, Fizz can get up on his trident. I think Zed can ult and dodge it if he does it at the right time. Vlad can pull and dodge it. A lot of these champions can get Hourglass and use that to dodge it. So he's okay. I just feel like there's a lot of counterplay to him now. I had him in the top 5 last time, but it just really hasn't panned out the way that I thought. There's just too many enchanters running around. Redemption is still very popular. Hourglass is popular. Yeah, Locket got nerfed out of the meta for the most part, and that helps. And Presence of Mind got changed, and that really helps him with the new thing that I talked about last patch notes. But overall, he still is just not going to be as reliable as other champions. Talia is still really good at roaming to side lanes and pushing, but the nerfs definitely affect her, right? So she got nerfed, I guess, a few patches ago, several times. The mana regen, the mana changes have hurt her a lot. And I didn't think that these changes were going to mean that much beforehand. So, like, this thing, you know, early on. But it has added up a lot. You know, she used to have a pretty high win rate, like 51, 52%. But after some of these nerfs, you know, 2-threaded volley right here near the end of last season was a pretty big deal. Then her health is constantly getting nerfed. And then the cooldown on threaded volley. And her health got lowered a lot. This makes her extremely vulnerable to assassins early on. And then a lot of this mana is going to make it very difficult for her to push and do her thing. And this is reflected in the stats, too. I mean, someone like a Talia should have a much higher win rate than 47%, because she can play pretty safe from a long range. And she has really good wave clear. And usually those types of champions are going to have a higher win rate. And she's not, like, super difficult mechanically to play. She's, you know, maybe a little bit above average, but... you know, I would think she'd be kind of closer to around like a Nivea win rate, like 50-51% right now. But she's down a lot more, and those nerfs have added up. So she is still a pretty good pick if you want to try to push and roam. And then I put Ryze on here as another honorable mention. He's still really good if you're really good on Ryze. I have seen Ryzes take over the game, but it just takes him a lot longer to get going, and he can get murdered by assassins. And, you know, along with Ryze, like Azir and Cassiopeia can still be really strong too. They're just, for Plat Minus, they're going to be way, way too difficult. Especially Cassiopeia is probably the hardest champion in the game to play. If not the hardest, she's definitely up there. Because of the way that you have to orb walk with her E, which can't be fixed to a mouse key, which I've talked about this in past. Like, you have to run one way with Cassiopeia and then E another way, and you constantly have to have really fast mouse work to do that, because you can't just attack move like you can with an AD carry. You have to actually click on the champion with the spell and click in a different direction if you want to move. So it's just constantly moving back and forth, and that's really, really difficult to do, even on very high mouse settings. Even if you're mechanically sound, it's very easy to misclick stuff with her. And so you need to actually hit skill shots, and you have to have really good mouse work in order to kite properly. So she's just very, very hard to play. So if you're, one trick on her, you can make her work, but otherwise I'd probably stay away from her. Okay, that's going to be it for this video. We kind of failed on a 30 to 45 minutes. It's just a lot of stuff I wanted to talk about as usual, but we did keep it under an hour 30, so that's good. And I will have timestamps, like I said in there. If you do like these kind of videos, I am trying to bring them down a little bit in time, but I also try to give just a ton of explanation behind why certain champions are good in a given meta, and not just, hey, these are the champions, they're good, and just assume everybody knows how to play them or why they're good. I try to actually go into the details there. But if you're interested in that, I do have a support tier list video. I think I kept it to about an hour this time. That one was actually an hour 15. But I did get the patch notes to an hour. So just lots of tier lists, lots of analysis on the channel. I have like a best one trick video, a split pushing guide, scaling guide, best combos in the bot lane guide, analyses of the different AP items, enchanter items, top 5 tips for better macro, 3 tips for better micro, just a ton of different content to help you out on the channel. Lots of different coaching sessions, lots of in-depth guides for a bunch of different champions. So just be sure to check it out, especially if you like support. Have a ton of stuff on the channel for that, and I'm trying to branch out and do things for other roles as well, like this tier list. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and I'll see you next time.